Nita.
Good afternoon and welcome to another edition of Conversations in Innovation. I'm J. Mohan. I'm the director for the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship here in Harrisburg University. And our mission is to empower innovators to build successful ventures. And this session was started as part of that mission to connect the local innovators with a global network. And hopefully over time, we build a thriving ecosystem that creates successful ventures from the underrepresented community of our region. So thank you all for joining. Each of these audience members in a way is supporting this mission. And today we have a really cool cast and crew in our panel. Artists, we usually, all of the entrepreneurs, we all think of ourselves as artists, but today our panel is really in the true sense of the artists. And so without delay, let's get to meet our panel, because since we have about an hour or less, I want to take the maximum time to hear from them. So let me start with Yannick Archer, who is a dear friend who I have known for almost 10 years. We first met when Yannick had a really cool idea for a startup, which I still believe is valid, and at some point, I think he should do it. He has since gone on to do great things in his career and is now with NBC Universal and is working out of 30 Rock at New York. Fred Bumaye is an award-winning independent creative director who has brought his unique brand of storytelling to a variety of networks, including BET, Bravo, the CW, Fuse, HBO, NBC Universal. And so I'm really excited to have somebody like him on our panel to talk about innovation, especially in these times, to hear, how are they dealing with this pandemic and how does the creative folks work in these times. And finally, Makia Cox, the beautiful and talented actress and dancer who is currently starring as Detective Nyla Harper in the ABC police drama. I think most of the folks in the audience and otherwise have probably seen her in somewhere in one of the shows. She's also known for her recurring role as Sasha in the CW drama 90210, and her role as a dancer in the Michael Jackson concert series and the related film This Is It. So I don't know how much time we will have, but I certainly have a lot of questions for how her journey was and all the people that she met along the way. So with that, let's start with Makia Cox, since that's probably the person that most of the audience have seen. So tell me about your journey and as an actress and how you got to your current position.
Hi guys, can you hear me? Yeah? Great. So I have been performing basically all of my life. I started dancing at a very young age. I was born in the Virgin Islands, so I danced in the Virgin Islands, and my parents didn't want to move me out here to LA or to New York right away. They still wanted me to have sort of a normal life growing up. So they moved me to Orlando. And at this time in Orlando, there were a lot of things moving to Orlando, to the studios there. Disney was already there, and Nickelodeon shows were coming there. So I got to have like a normal life, but then I also got to be on set and be around people. My brother actually was on a show called 15, which Ryan Reynolds rarely talks about, but that was one of the first shows that he did. And then I went to school. I went to Dr. Phillips High School, which was actually right across the street from Universal Studios. So while in school, we could sometimes hear people on the roller coasters right next door to us. And I then went to Florida State for musical theater. I went on tour for a couple years with some musical theater shows with Fame and then Smokey Joe's Cafe. And I sort of by accident ended up out here in Los Angeles. I really always thought I would be going to New York because I have this background in musical theater. I sing and I dance. Excuse me. But I sort of fell into an agency out here. She asked me, she was actually an old friend. Her and my mother were friends, and so she asked if I would come out here, and she was like, you can stay with me for a week or so, and you can just stay on my couch. A week turned into 2 weeks, which then turned into months, which then turned into now I live here and I've been here for 15 years. So I always say you go where the work takes you, and for some reason it was just bringing me out here. And every time I kept telling myself, I want to go back. I want to really get to New York. And the more convicted I was in that feeling, the bigger the thing was that kept me here. So yeah, I just have realized that this is where home is for me, which was weird for me to say for a while. For a while, I didn't want to call it home, but it's definitely home now.
So we need to know more about, what you're doing these days and some of the current projects. So we'll come back to that. So Fred, tell us a little bit about, I've met a couple of like actors and actresses in LA. I had a chance to meet with Will Smith once, but I think this is the first time I'm meeting a director. So I'm very excited about that part. And so Fred, tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got here.
Well, thank you for having me. I basically got my start. Um, I worked my way up. I went to school. I went to Howard in D.C. And at the time I went to school, there was a bunch of talented people who were there at the time. Like Bradford Young was one of my classmates. He's this big time cinematographer now. Chadwick Boseman was there at the time. So it was kind of like this emerging crop of creatives who kind of all have since gone on to do, big things. Um, but when I first got out of school, I paid my dues. I started out as an intern. I had interned at a production company up here. I don't think they're around anymore. Um, it's called Drop Squad. They did a lot of work with Spike and 40 Acres, and that was kind of like my way in. And then I went on to PA for years. I did, music videos like in New York, and it was kind of brutal. Like, you kind of work music videos. Kind of know it's like it'd be like 26-hour days, and not exactly the safest of working conditions. So I kind of came up through a non-normative uh, work environment. Uh, so I did that for a while. Then I actually started composing. I did jingles for TV promos and commercials for a few years, and then uh, kind of segued into editing because I saw the editor would place, I guess they call it scratch music, but a lot of times the editor could place a scratch music in, and then that's what the producers would choose for the spot. So I was like, oh, if I'm the editor, I can get my music into the spot and get placements that way. So I started editing for a while. Then I did what's known as in the industry they call it a predator. I get in today's climate, it's not the best name for it probably, but it's like you're a producer slash editor, so you're producing and you're editing the stuff that you're producing. I did that for a while. Then I ended up doing writer producer. That's what they call it. It's basically you're like a creative producer in terms of the internal agencies at networks. And I did that for a while, and that's kind of how I got my break to start directing. I would just nag the creative directors to give me a shot to direct some of the stuff that I wrote. Because normally you would write stuff, and then they would bring in kind of bigger name directors to direct it. So I just, one of the creative directors finally gave me a shot on like this kind of low level kind of campaign, and it went on to win. In the promo industry, they have what's called a Promax Award, which is supposed to be like that's like I guess what Clios are for commercials. And it went on to win an award, and then that kind of gave me some validation. And then after that, I was able to that was kind of the deal. If I was the writer on campaigns, they would let me direct. And then eventually I built my reel out to the point that networks and brands would just reach out to me to just come in, even if it's not stuff that I wrote, to come in and direct. So that was kind of my background. I kind of just took the long route, but it was kind of beneficial in the sense that I've done so many different creative positions that it kind of gives you an advantage in the sense that as a writer and someone who also is an editor, you kind of know, like, you don't overshoot when you're on set. You kind of know what you need for post, and you're more of a fiscally responsible director, I guess I could say. But that was kind of my long-winded, convoluted journey.
No, that's great. I mean, this is because the including me and a lot of the audience have very little visibility into what happens or how somebody like you come to where you are. So this is really fascinating for all of us. So Yannick, coming to you, what was your journey like?
Sorry. Hey Jay, how are you? Thank you for having me. I started in television. I've been working in television for my entire career. You know, my first job I got was at TV Land, which is a Viacom company, and I worked there for about a year. And from there, I went and started working at VH1, and I was a writer producer there. And basically, just you make promos, you work on marketing campaigns for shows. So we don't make the shows, but we market them. And at the time when I was there, they had a lot of reality TV, unscripted television shows, like so-called Flavor of Love, which is one of the earlier shows where people live in a house together and sort of like craziness ensues. So a lot of stuff like that. And then I left there and went to a channel called Fuse, which is a music television channel, which was focused primarily on like music videos, music performances. And then went to TBS, where I launched a show, a late night show for George Lopez called Lopez Tonight. And they brought me in to work on that. And then shortly after that, they brought Conan O'Brien to TBS, and we launched a show there for Conan as well. So those were the two the bigger campaigns I worked on while at TBS. And then I left TBS and went to BET, and worked there for a couple of years, and then went to Oxygen, and then now I'm at Oxygen as a creative director, and we do true crime stuff. So for the entire time, I was always working in marketing, marketing shows, and just coming up with creative ways to try to sell the show to an audience.
Thanks, Yannick. So Mikia, coming back to you, what's your current project, like the ABC one, The Rookie, right? How does the project come to you? Because you mentioned about, working with a talent agent and things like that. So does an actress usually read scripts, or does this come through somebody else? Or, how does all this work? And what's the current project you're working on, and what's some of your future projects?
So the current project I'm working on is called The Rookie. It's on ABC. We are going into our third season. I came in season 2, and the audition, we audition, and so it occasionally we'll get straight bookings, but most of the time you have to audition. I have an agent and a manager. Both of them get me auditions, but it usually comes from the agent. And so my manager actually called me on a Friday, and he told me that there was this audition. I had a feeling something was happening because they kept asking me for my demo reel, and so they basically were trying to get me in for this audition, but they didn't want me. They did a really good job in terms of making this deal. I've worked with ABC before. I've been a series regular on their shows before. And so they personally felt like I shouldn't even have to audition. But they were making sure that they saw at least a few people read with Nathan Fillion, who is, I'm his training officer. And they wanted to make sure that there was chemistry there, because chemistry is a strange thing. And when I say chemistry, there's chemistry dealing with people who like each other or love each other. Then there's just regular chemistry dealing with people who might be friends or whatever. And sometimes people have great chemistry off screen, but it doesn't transfer to screen, or vice versa. So they do want to just make sure that you have that. So they asked that I come in to do a chemistry read with Nathan that Monday. So I got the audition on Friday. I practiced over the weekend. I went in and I did the chemistry read with Nathan on Monday, which is a whole, sort of a test. They have, it's in one room. They have, some lighting in there, and there's about 5 or 6 people in there. You do the scene once or twice. They'll give you notes, and then you do it again and make sure you use those notes.
But I thought, actors were very good in faking chemistry, right? I mean, so you still have to have a chemistry read before you.
It's interesting. You can try to fake it, and it can work, but there's like a special spark that happens when there's actual real chemistry there. It's strange, and you don't know it until you see it, because you'll go, that doesn't seem right, but oh, that does. You know what I mean? So yeah, you can try and fake it the best you can, and then some actors are really good at faking it because they are not friends off camera, but then they get on camera and they can fake it. So that does happen. But they would rather have good chemistry all around.
I said,
sorry, what'd you say?
Name any names?
I can't name any names. I can't do that. I can say, though, at least for me, that I've been very lucky. I think everyone that I've worked with I've liked, and I've had good chemistry with everyone, which is that's great. But yeah, so then I found out that I got the part the very next day, which was Tuesday. I then had to be on set the very next day, which was Wednesday. Yeah. So it was fast. And on top of it, it was the first episode that I was introduced in, so that meant that they gave my character a lot. So I had a lot of lines, had a lot of stuff to say and do, and I was in there every day for the first, couple weeks. So that was not easy. Especially, it's always also interesting coming into a group that has already been established. But I will say this is a wonderful group. I have been very blessed to have worked with amazing cast, people who are just down to earth and great to be around. This is for sure one of those casts. We are basically like a family. And they welcomed me in with open arms, and I'm very grateful to them. And they made it very easy and comfortable for me. So that was good.
I have a few follow-up questions, but I wanted to ask Fred this because we kind of, even though it's kind of half joking about the whole chemistry thing, as a director, Fred, do you get to pick the cast members, or is that like somebody else has already decided and you are shooting with them, whether it's commercial or, on TV? Or do you have a say in this?
Well, most of my work is in commercials and promos versus narrative. So I have input in the sense of if we're casting something that's we actually need actors for, where there's roles outside of the principal talent. Typically, if it's for a network or a brand, they normally have a talent that they've already attached to the project by the time I get involved. If it's like a celebrity endorsing that particular brand, or if it's a celebrity that's the host of like an award show, or the actors that are the stars of the show that I'm promoting, that's already kind of baked in by the time I get involved. So I wouldn't really, there wouldn't really be any casting as far as that's concerned because they've already casted the shows. But sometimes you have situations where you have to cast extras or other day players around those principal talent that have to interact with the principals, and then I have involvement in that in terms of doing casting sessions and kind of trying to narrow down who those players are going to be. But it still has to get vetted through the network brass or the people at the particular brand, and they they have the final say, like weigh in on who gets selected. I mean, I can give them my choices, and it depends on what my relationship is with that set of executives. Sometimes they take more of an input than others, but usually, if I weigh in, they're usually somewhat receptive to it. It may not be all of my picks, like if it's like half a dozen people, maybe like 3 or 4 out of the 6, but generally they take your input because that's kind of one of the reasons they're hiring you is they want your input, but I don't have the final say on it.
Your current projects that you're working on, and the ones that's already on TV, like commercials.
Well, I haven't shot anything recently since COVID. I had a bunch of stuff lined up, and then it kind of all went away. And one of my things is right now I live in New York, but I'd say probably 90% of my jobs are in LA. So before COVID, I could move differently. Like I could get a call about a job and jump on a flight and fly out to LA and then do the tech scout and the casting and shoot the thing in a week, and it wasn't an issue. But now the amount of safety protocols that are in place, it's not really something that's going to be possible. So I'm actually planning to relocate next year. I have some things that within the last few weeks, I started getting calls about jobs. So I'm up for some commercials, but I don't know, because that's a whole like bidding process. Like sales reps send your reel out, agencies look at it, they decide whether or not they want to have you participate in the bidding process. Then you have to do a treatment. You have to do a kickoff call. They walk you through the boards. Then you submit a treatment. You walk them through your treatment, and then if you get selected, then you go into the process of actually prepping the job out. So current projects, I'm not currently on anything, but like last year, I did this really cool campaign with the CW and Microsoft. It was a cool branded campaign. They had a series called All American, so I got to work with one of the stars on the show. She plays there's this character on the show named Coop. So she was actually in character playing her character because her character on the show is a kind of up and coming artist. So we shot a music video for her character. And the show takes place in Crenshaw, so we went to Crenshaw. It was like a couple blocks from Nipsey Hussle, like where he grew up and everything. So it was kind of cool to be able to shoot a project in Crenshaw and kind of bring the resources of Microsoft to Crenshaw, because I did have a say in picking locations and picking like we shot part of it in a church there. So, renting out the church, so the church got a location fee. And even in terms of like, one of the things that I was kind of adamant about was when you shoot, a lot of times when you shoot in disenfranchised communities, they don't necessarily, they kind of take that to the wayside, meaning if you're shooting in an affluent community, there's protocols in place. It's not like you just get a permit and that's it. You have to, like if you're shooting in, let's say there's 4 houses on a block and you're shooting in the one house, you still have to go to the other houses on the block and work out to deal with those neighbors because you're inconveniencing them. But the way that the production was moving was almost like, well, we have a permit and we have police detail, so we're good. And I'm like, no, we're not good. We need to go in the community. We need to talk to, the community board and work out how we're going to shoot here. And they worked out a deal where they're able to, get a lot of those guys on payroll as well. So that was a gratifying feeling. Um, and it was just kind of cool having these like Microsoft execs from Seattle, like in the middle of like the lower 60s out in Crenshaw. It was just kind of a cool experience.
So, Yannick, what are you working on these days? Because I know one of the ones, the Black Lives Matter, that you put together, that you directed that, right? But outside of that, for your for NBC and or Oxygen, what are some of the projects you're working
on? Yeah, so we did a piece for in light of all the events that took place with George Floyd. We made a spot for victims of justice and I mean for justice and for victims and for George Floyd. And so this spot was a spot that ran on our air. It's actually currently running on our air. And we, the ethos of Oxygen is really about like getting justice for victims. And I think that's something that we believe in and we stand on. And everything we do is all about getting justice for victims. So all of our shows are, it's about, people who either lost their life or lost someone who was close to them, and telling their story in a compassionate way, but also bringing awareness to their story, because a lot of the times these cases go unsolved, so they become cold cases, and people sort of forget about them over time, just like any sort of death, and so we pride ourselves on telling these stories honestly and compassionately, and without trying to embellish the truth or make. Sometimes you get these true crime stories about people who may have either disappeared or were tragically killed, and the story gets sensationalized to some degree, and it's just really about doing it with honor. So we were constantly telling these types of stories, and right now we're in the process of working with the show called Cold Justice, and a host of that show is called, her name is Kelly Siegler. She's a prosecutor. She's doing a lot of stuff on our air right now, hosting lots of what they call like marathons, which is taking several episodes of a show and airing them sort of back to back, and sort of creating just like an environment for people to come to and watch a show for a certain number of hours. But production has really slowed down for us, and so a lot of our shows that were supposed to air in 2020 have moved to 2021, simply because production halted, in March when COVID really took off in the country. So we moved, our rollout has changed significantly over the past few months, and so we don't really have a lot of new shows on the air right now. But we're gearing up for a lot of shows in the first quarter of next year, which we'll start marketing third and fourth quarter of this year.
Great segue into my next question for Mekia, because the pandemic kind of, pretty much took everybody by surprise. And then there's this whole uncertainty of it is one of those things, it's never ending. Is it ending? Is it going away? What happens? And so many of us, for the first time, are getting on cameras because we're not used to this thing at all. So we're all figuring out, how to get on camera, and, how do you look? Are you looking at the camera? Or am I supposed to look at the person? All of these things. But then, artists like you who are very comfortable there, but now suddenly you can't get on the camera with the audience. So how has this impacted? And are you seeing, the networks getting back to starting shooting, and, or is there like different ways they are doing this? What are you seeing?
It's funny that you're asking this right now, because yesterday we got a text from our showrunner saying that we've been pushed back yet again. So we were, if we would, okay, I'll start by saying we stopped shooting. We were done with shooting maybe like 2 or 3 days before the lockdown really happened. So we were lucky. We wouldn't have been working during this time anyways. However, we would have come back sometime in July. That got pushed back to August. Then that got pushed back a couple weeks, still in August, but just got pushed back a couple weeks. We just got a text yesterday saying that it will now not be until September. And that's questionable. We still don't really know if that's like for sure. So it's weird. It's strange because everything is so up in the air right now. We just don't know what's gonna happen. Um, if we do come back there, it's interesting because the writers' room has started, but they have to think of ways to keep us safe, basically. So they have to write in scenes that are more outdoors. And, we have our, roll call scene where there's the 7 series regulars, and then there's like 30 or 40 extras that are all in an enclosed space. We are supposed to have that, every episode, kind of, but they're going to have to figure out ways around that. So it's interesting. We'll see how it all goes. There's also the fact that we're going to have to get tested probably every week. Not sure what test or which test, but there's that. There's talk about having, hand washing stations just placed in areas around the set. So it'll definitely be different once we get back, but there's still so much up in the air. There's still so much that none of us really know.
So how do you stay engaged, or what is it like for an actor when you're not shooting,
when we
but you can't even get
It's been interesting. I've done a few of these panels. I honestly am using this time I have a 1-year-old, a 1.5-year-old who just came back, so you might hear her possibly. So I'm spending a lot of time with her. When I first started the show, she was only 8 months, and I was working a lot, so I didn't get that time with her. So I appreciate having that right now. Honestly, for me, it's about sort of trying to get my life in order as much as possible before I do have to go back to work. So in terms of creativity, I'm more so just trying to consume and ingest as much as possible. So reading books and, like you, Fred, I actually have done some editing myself. But I would like to get into the directing game at some point in time. Me and my best friend and business partner, we have a production company called Little Man Productions that we used to do plays out here together, original works that she created. But we would like to get into film. So I'm trying to catch up on that, read about that, and just ingest as much as I can right now.
Fred, so like you said, right now the COVID shut down everything. There's not. So are you seeing others or your contemporaries who actually are trying to shoot something, doing it in a different way, like I don't know, virtual world, or is everybody pretty much waiting for things to go back so they can actually start shooting, or is there a different way you can so they can actually start shooting?
No, people are definitely shooting. Like I have an AD I work with a lot in LA. Like usually when I'm in LA, he's like my go-to guy. He's working on stuff like crazy, but it's just the producers at the production companies I've spoken with, and the crew members that I've spoken with who are working, they're shooting a lot in Atlanta and LA. It's just that the safety protocols that are in place have just changed the dynamic of how things can be shot. So crew sizes have to be reduced. Like it might be like less than half, or like maybe a third the amount of crew members who can be on set. And so in terms of budgeting a project out, something that you normally shoot in a day, now you might have to shoot in 2 days or possibly 3 days because, if you come on set typically, depending on what the budget is, the operational budget for the day, if you're shooting something for under like 200,000, which is like 150,000 or something like that, you don't really have money in the budget for a pre-light. So you would bulk up your crew, so your E&G crew would be larger, so they could come in, do maybe a 2 or 3 hour pre-light in the morning. Hopefully there's no set builds, you're just shooting in a practical location and you'd be able to shoot. If you have overtime, you would just eat the overage costs. but those aren't realities that really are feasible now because you have to limit the time people are on set. You can't have these large crews. You know, like I said, we reduce crew size. So since you can't kind of show up with like force or show a force with this massive crew, because a lot of times, even like a modest budget set between crew, talent, network executives, you know, you might have like 80 people on set. That's not something that can work anymore. So a lot of times, you know, your client, instead of having Video Village on set, they might have to be someplace remote, and they have like a Terra deck in Video Village remote, and they're watching it from there. Crew has to wear masks, so you have to give them mask breaks. So, you know, they can only be on set for a certain amount of time, where they have to give them, you know, a 15, 20-minute break to take their mask off and get some fresh air, drink water, you know, things of that nature. Even like craft service, like, I mean, really, if you've ever been on a set is just like a petri dish breeding ground for like COVID. Like, it's probably one of the worst. I mean, everything's like open. Like, it's like a buffet style kind of catering thing. Like, but I guess now everything's like pre-packaged meals that they kind of individually give out to the crew members and the cast. So just the dynamics of how things can be shot have had to change, and I'm sure the insurance, even insuring a COVID shoot, those costs have gone up. So everything is just becoming kind of smaller. Crews are going to have to become lighter and more nimble. And to Makia's point about even like the writers room, like even in terms of like commercials and promos, they're going to have to come up with ways to write things that work within this new world that we're in. There's certain things you just can't really get away with shooting anymore, especially on reduced budgets and timelines. So things, even in terms of, you know, your rollout, like a lot of times, if you're promoting a show, there's just like 10-week rule. A lot of times they want to start promoting a show at least minimum of 10 weeks out. That's like the bare minimum. You really should be promoting further out than that, but that's kind of like bare minimum, worst case scenario. But that also informs you being able, when are you actually going to do this shoot? How many days do you have to shoot, you know, the project? Like, you know, if you're, a lot of these networks, the marketing teams are based in New York, but most of the talent is in LA or Atlanta. So now, are you traveling your execs to the shoot, or are they going to have to stay where they are and kind of watch things remotely because they can't be on set because it's just not practical? So all these considerations are kind of things that have to come into play. And even the types of, you know, things that you can shoot, like, I don't know if there's going to be a lot of, you know, scenes with people in close proximity or being intimate or kissing, or a lot of fight kind of scenes. I just don't know how those things are necessarily going to work in this new world. I mean, you know, there's a lot of creative people out there. I'm sure they'll come up with ways to still make things entertaining and make people want to buy products, but things are going to have to adapt to the new normal that we're in.
Yeah, that's a interesting point. So, Yannick, so what are you seeing from the network perspective? Is there innovations, new ways you're thinking of shooting? Is there technologies that you're seeing that's coming out? Like in our world, the Zoom has become like the big thing, right? Everybody is now on Zoom, and that's the only way we are doing business. We are on calls. We use Google Docs to collaborate on documents. So we're trying to figure out all these things, and Zoom just nobody had heard of it, became this big company suddenly. So in the entertainment media world, what is there like equivalents of this that you are seeing, or how does?
Yeah, I think there have been a lot of changes. Really simple things like in the office, like meetings. There are no opportunities for impromptu meetings anymore. You can't just walk down the hall from one conference room to the next or one office to the next and see somebody and have a conversation about something. Everything has to happen either through email, a chat, or through a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams call. So there are a lot more meetings now, just to try to sort of get business done. But there's also like been a lot of changes with the way we shoot things, and we've done some shoots recently since we've had this COVID lockdown with some of our talent, and like recently we shot with this guy named Dr. Terry Dubrow, who was on the show called Botched, and he's also, I think his wife is also on Real Housewives of Orange County, and he's doing a show for us, and we would normally go to LA and shoot with him, but we couldn't do that. So there are a lot of production companies who have these remote capabilities. They will either send essentially an entire camera rig in a box that you just open up and talent can set up themselves, or they'll send somebody to a location, like to a stage or to their house, and they'll send in like 1 or 2 people to set up cameras and set up lights in complete PPE gear, and we'll do a shoot. And so we'll be here, we'll all be working remotely from home, but we'll zoom into the shoot and be able to see the monitor and speak to the talent on set remotely. So that's been new for us and a new way of working that we've had to adapt to. And it's been fine, but the productions of the quality it's gone down to some degree, simply because you just don't have the same capabilities that you would normally have with a full crew on set to light and to use those types of cameras. But it still looks good, but it's just a different way of interacting with people and not being able to communicate the same ways that you normally would. And I think that's something that maybe as we move forward, when you watch TV, you see a lot of, if you watch news and stuff like that, a lot of the contributors who would normally be in the studio on set talking with a host are now all sort of in the situation that we're in now, where they're just using a computer camera from home. And I think as people's eyes sort of adapt to this new sort of look, I think a lot of companies might say, oh, you know what, we've been getting by shooting this way. We were saving money as opposed to flying everybody around the country to show up on set. This is maybe this can work for us in some instances. I mean, when you're doing making a television show or a movie, that wouldn't work. But I think people are getting used to looking at footage in different ways, and seeing people talking on camera in different ways. And so I think what looks like poor quality now might seem like good quality a year from now if we're still in this situation. So
yeah, that's interesting. So I have a few questions, but the audience posted a question, which I think I'll start with Mick here, because you probably, given you have a talent agent, manager, and all that, and you have, one of the famous actresses of our times, so somebody who's coming up, I think this is from the audience. So somebody put this question that says, do you think YouTube is a viable way for new talent to get their work out? So, I mean, how does somebody find, because, established actresses like you, they know how to get to you, but how does new talent get discovered?
I mean, I would say yes. I feel like there are so many different ways that you can. What's really nice about where we are right now in the film industry is that we can do things ourselves now in a way that we couldn't before. Equipment doesn't cost as much as it used to. You can get a really nice camera that can shoot some really nice quality, as long as you have a really good DP, someone who knows what they're doing. You can make some really nice work. And if YouTube is the only place you can put it up, why not? Insecure, Issa Rae, she started on YouTube. You know what I mean? My thing is create to create, because I feel like whenever I am in a slump or I need something to do, I start to create, and work begets work. So even though I'm working, maybe I'm not getting paid, maybe I'm paying myself, somehow work will come just because I'm in that mode of creating. I think sure, put your stuff on YouTube, and just in the act of doing it, you'll start to understand things in a different way. You'll start to meet people. You'll start to network. You'll start to connect, and something will happen that will either. And then again, YouTube is also coming up. Excuse me. They're getting their own TV shows and all of that. So there are many different ways that you can get your work out there. And if YouTube is the one that you like, then go with that one.
One quote that I saw that I thought was very interesting. It was Will Smith who said, "In my mind, I have always been an A-list Hollywood superstar. You all just didn't know yet." So, you know, when you are,
Will Smith said that?
yeah, this was long back, when he broke out. So this
Oh,
is,
this is a long time ago. Gotcha. I was like, I think we all think of him as
yeah, so this is
A-list.
in the early days. So when
Gotcha.
So when you are an actor, do is there like like I am a superstar, I'm a TV actor, movie actor. Is there a difference, or how does this all is it all only in the audience mind versus the actual actor itself?
Totally. I am an actress. That's what I call myself. I am an actress. I act on TV and film. I am in no way a celebrity. I am in no way, you even said famous. I don't even think that. Like, I just happen to be an actress who acts on a TV show. Um, but yes, there are tiers in terms of, there are A-list actors, B whatever. I don't even know if I'm on that tier anywhere. um, but I'm happy to sort of just be a working actress. It takes a lot to get here. And what's funny about being here is that I still feel like, which is nice. I think it's good to always feel like you're on the grind and there's still some place for you to go to not be complacent. Um, but I remember actually Nathan on the show with me asking like a group of us when did we like finally know that we made it, and a couple of us were like, I don't know if I know that yet. I'm still trying to make it. so,
I think that's
so
very
yeah.
humble of you, but I think for a lot of us who are watching, you have made it. So, uh,
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
so Fred, the question I have, because we in the entrepreneur world, we always talk about the left brain, the right brain, the creative versus the logical, analytical brain, and all that. So, can can anybody learn to be a director, or is there a part of creativity, imagination that's inborn talent that's part of it? Uh, Based on your experience, what would you say?
Um, I think it's a it's a subjective field, so um, I think anybody can be a director. I think there's definitely, and again, things are subjective, so it's kind of like a taste thing. So somebody you might consider to be a good director might be different than someone I consider to be a good director. Um, and it depends on what your definition of good is. Like, is it that you're making millions of dollars, or are you making projects that actually are winning all these awards? Or are you making stuff that just impacts people's day-to-day lives, or you know? So it kind of depends on what your definition of, I guess, success is as a director. But just to have the job title of director, I think there might be some kind of inherent talent to it where that some people pick up on quicker than others. And if you don't have that, you probably would have to just do more due diligence and put in more work. But it's not something that can't be learned. Would you be a great director? Whatever your definition of great is, might not be. But could you be a working director? Yeah, it's not something. Yeah, I think more so than the skill is the opportunity and the access, because um, it's a really expensive medium to get into, and it's almost like the equivalent in the sports world of somebody being able to excel at like hockey versus somebody being able to excel at basketball. Like to be able to excel at basketball outside of talent, all you need is a ball. Really. You really don't even need like a real hoop. You get like a milk carton and put it up on like a light pole and that and you can practice. Versus hockey, there's you got to buy the skates, you got to buy the equipment, you got to have access to an ice skating rink. It's like it's a more difficult profession to get into, and filmmaking and working in TV is kind of the same thing. It's just a harder profession to break into because the costs, even though costs have been reduced because nobody's shooting on film anymore, things are digital, things of that nature. To get somebody to give you a shot, because the operational expenses are so high that people don't necessarily want to take a chance. Like they don't, even like a small budget, commercial or promo is still like probably 100,000 or something like that. Somebody probably, they don't really know you. They don't really want to give you a chance. They don't. It's not that you can't do it. It's just that they don't trust that you'll be able to execute, and get things done within a timely fashion. So, I personally think anybody could do it, but it's more about having that access and getting the opportunity and convincing people to, just give you a chance. That's kind of the most difficult part, in my experience. More so than the actual work is just getting a chance to be able to do it.
Well, thanks, Fred. So we are almost getting to the end of the time. So there's another question that the audience question that came up, which I think for all three of you. So we'll start with you, Yannick. What do you find most stimulates and inspires your creative energy? So, what is it that...
There's any one thing I would say. I think it's a really big part of like my job. I would say is finding inspiration. I think it's really important to sort of just be a student of everything possible, because I think you can find inspiration from anything, from at least from my job is concerned, from marketing shows and coming up with ideas and unique ways to try to make something seem appealing to an audience. And so it's just watching lots of movies, watching lots of TV, paying attention to everything, the way things are shot, the way things are written, looking at the open of a show. You might watch a show and like just want to get to the first line of dialogue, but sometimes the open has something really like inspirational in it that's like, wow, that was really creative. It could be from playing video games, reading magazines, going out, looking at art, visiting museums. There's so many ways to find inspiration, and I think if you really take the time to look at everything around you, you'll notice that there's something inspiring in almost everything in the world. So it's a big part of my job, I think, is just making sure that you're aware of what has been done before, so you don't necessarily just recreate that without, like, unknowingly. Like, you might make something and think, wow, this is like a great idea that I came up with that no one's done before, and then someone sees it and they say, oh yeah, this was done by somebody over here like 25 years ago. You didn't know it because you didn't take the time to be a student. So it's good to look at things for inspiration, to try to to help spark an idea, whether you want to steal an idea or just find something from that idea that you want to take and reimagine in some way, but also to know what's been done before, so you can try to come up with some original ideas that really haven't been done, or at least haven't been done necessarily the way that you're going to approach it, which is like a reimagined way of something that already exists.
Because we always have these young startup guys coming and saying, I want to build the next Google. And then the question is, why? Google is already there, right? I mean, so shouldn't you be doing something different? So I guess the same question comes back to you, Makia, because what is it that keeps you stimulated, drive your creative energy day in, day out?
I mean, honestly, everything Yannick just said. It's everything. I mean, I like I said, I'm trying to consume as much as I can right now because, like, for example, I don't know if you guys do this whenever you're watching TV or a film or whatever. You sort of, I think I'm just constantly analyzing things. I will say, I know when either TV show or movie is really good when I don't do that. But if I'm looking at it and I'm saying, oh, I would have changed this, or maybe I would have done this like that. How would I have done that? You know what I mean? That's just something that I'm constantly doing all the time. And so sometimes, yeah, sometimes inspiration comes just from, watching even a commercial or something. If someone says something, I go, oh, okay, well, how would I do that? And then I go off and I try and practice that or something. You know what I mean? I find inspiration from any and everything. I think as an artist, that's just kind of what you do.
We're almost out of time, but one or two quick notes on the same question. What stimulates your creative energy when you are not actually working on your own project?
Yeah, it's just trying to find, you constantly want to try to be a student of the craft and find, even outside of, the visual arts or like TV and film. A lot of, there's been a lot of films that were inspired by paintings. I was watching a director's commentary with Ridley Scott. He was talking about Gladiator, and he was talking about how the whole thing was basically inspired by, he had this, I forgot where he said he got the painting, but it was this painting in his office of a gladiator in a Coliseum, and the way the light was kind of going through the rafters of the Coliseum and illuminating the face of the gladiator in the photo. And then the script ended up coming across his desk, but the impetus of the whole thing was the way that he shot the film. Because like a lot of times I think directing, the most important thing is tone. As a director, you're kind of setting the tone of the project. You can look at a situation like, the Batman series, like Christopher Nolan's take on it versus Zack Snyder versus Tim Burton. It's the same set of characters, but they're three completely different takes on those characters. And then creating these worlds and kind of put those characters into those worlds. Well, for him, to kind of creating that world started from that painting. And had he not seen that painting, Gladiator may have possibly been a different film, So it's looking outside of the typical, like Christopher Nolan wasn't even a film student in college, like an English major, but he read a lot of films. A lot of books, and those influenced his works. Like, I think the last Dark Knight film, the speech in the end with Commissioner Gordon was like, where they're burying Bruce Wayne or whatever. That whole excerpt is from, I think it's A Tale of Two Cities or something like that. His whole movie. So it's like those things inspire his works and his writings and his story art. So I think you definitely have to look outside of the medium that you work in and find inspiration in other platforms. But I get inspired by all kinds of stuff. Sometimes people send me things. Sometimes I find stuff on my own. Sometimes, especially in New York, like you're always passing people on the street and somebody says something. It's like just certain stuff you just can't make up. It's like certain conversations you couldn't make it up if you wanted to. And you might hear it and you might write some things down, like, oh, this is a good script. But you can find inspiration, anywhere. The point is to always be open to kind of seeking it out.
So we are almost out of time. So thanks again to all three of you. This is great. My dream is that at some point maybe you guys will come visit Harrisburg University, and maybe we do a project around what we are doing here, where Makia would be the actress in that, Fred would direct it, and Yannick, you are the creative person that pulls all this together. So that would be a cool project for us to look forward to, and maybe we'll start talking about some of those kind of things. But I also really, really appreciate all of you joining this, because for our audience and for our students, who are working on really technology-focused areas, to hear from creative folks and how you think and your journey, this has been great. And thanks again to all three of you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Since 2001, Harrisburg University has grown again and again. Just last week, the school held a groundbreaking ceremony for its new Health Science Education Center hotel and restaurant. The building will allow for an additional 1,000 students there. Another addition to Harrisburg University, the Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, or CIE. This will help students start and build companies. Executive Director Jay Mohan is here to tell me more about it. Can you give just a basic description, sir, of what the CIE is? Just elaborate a little for us.
Yes, so the big goal is to get people who have new ideas, innovative ideas, to get them through to the execution and build out companies. So we hope that the next Facebook, the next Google will come from this region. That will be the great dream that I have. So that's kind of the basic idea. So we provide with guidance on strategy, marketing. We give them the infrastructure to build out the new companies. While it's focused on the students, we encourage local entrepreneurs to come in and take advantage of the facility. That's kind of how we're looking at it.
Why do you think this is needed?
Yeah, so if you think about the economy today, people call it gig economy or automated economy. So things are moving rapidly and changing really fast. So that kind of makes people either terrified or excited. So we want people to be excited about the changes and prepare them how to face these new technologies, how to understand artificial intelligence, data analytics, machine learning, or robotics, and create opportunities from them. So if you look at most of the job descriptions these days, you will always see that they are looking for innovative and entrepreneurial people. So that's what we're trying to build here, and that's why I think it's the need of the day.
Let's talk about some of the highlights. Once completed, there's going to be some really cool things going on there. Tell me about those.
Yeah, so we're going to, so Harrisburg University already have like biotech labs. There's so many different features that we have already built. So the idea here is to connect the makerspace, the active learning labs, all of this together. And this becomes like the coordinating center, which will pull in resources and infrastructure from all across HU. So that's kind of how we look at it. Because my job is to create or empower others. So the tagline that we use for this is empowering innovators to build successful ventures. And that's not just a tagline, that's a commitment we make to anybody who comes in. So that's why we try to have that infrastructure in place.
The advantages for students seems almost obvious, right? But the thing is, this also benefits our region, the Harrisburg region. And can you explain how so?
Yeah, so if you look at, everybody says we want to recreate Silicon Valley. But Silicon Valley has its own unique features. But if you look across the region, you have Austin, which has come up really like a whole lot of innovations, a lot of companies. DC, from where I am, there's a whole lot of companies from that region. So if you look at Harrisburg all over, it's most of the regions where these development have happened, it's around a university, a science and technology university that kind of becomes the hub, and there is all these spokes that develop around that. So that's kind of how I look at it. So Harrisburg and the larger region around that will really benefit from all these entrepreneurs that are coming in with new ideas, and it will create jobs and the economy.
It's terrific. And like I was sharing with you, what Harrisburg University is doing is just remarkable here in our area. Thank you for sharing this latest adventure with us. We'll be right back with our second half hour.
Thank you.